Hi guys, me again. Different day, different pair of dungarees as always. Would recommend these, by the way, actually, if you're planning on doing a van build. Dungarees are great. Little hammer holder, pockets. Great way to store all your shit. Don't forget your shit. It'll be fine. So in the last video we spoke all about soundproofing, sound dampening, we spoke about decoupling, how I did my walls, how I did my roof and my carpet, how I did the bed, the layout I chose, materials as well. We spoke about matchboard MDF and Havelock wool and insulation, all of that kind of stuff. And in this video we're going to be talking about acoustic treatment, and right at the end I'm going to show you my final reveal, kind of the finished piece. And a couple of finishing touches I did as well, and then we'll close with my thoughts and some tips and tricks, things that I would do in the future or things that I would advise you guys to do if you have a bigger van to work with, which if I'm honest, I wish I had. Cool, so what is acoustic treatment? Acoustic treatment is effectively the treating, funny that, of standing waves. So standing waves are when you have two sound waves that are sort of cancelling each other out, and they create weird frequencies, weird boosts in the frequencies within a space, but good for us. We can work out what those standing waves are, the problem ones, and we can treat them. So that's what we're going to talk about in this video. In order to acoustically treat those standing waves as effectively as possible, you want your space to be as close to finished as you can get it. Obviously the addition of soft furnishings and things like that, you know, they're all going to aid with sound absorption, so that doesn't matter too much. But the key thing is to be done with your soundproofing, done with your sound dampening, and all that second skinning that we talked about in the first video, so that you're only dealing with those interior noises, with that standing waves that are coming from the inside, and you don't have transfer affecting sort of your measurements and your calculations. Because I wanted to do my acoustic treatment as accurately as possible, I tried to get the bulk of the rest of the van finished first. So the first thing to do that with was to cut the mattress down to size. So when I began my conversion, I started with just slightly bigger than a double mattress in two parts. My mattress is made from memory foam. It's an open cell foam on the top and a closed cell foam on the bottom, which is super great for sound absorption because it leaves you all these little air pockets for sound energy to kind of disperse, which is obviously great. That's what we want. To create covers for these bits of mattress, I took really cheap, crappy, I think they're Dunelm actually, duvet covers, and I basically just cut them down to size, sewed along the sides, flip them back round, and put those over the top, and that fabric is super permeable then, so that the sound can go through nice and easy, and it's ready to be absorbed as much as possible by the actual foam itself. The reason that we've just spoken about using open cell memory foam as my material and also having a permeable fabric is because I wanted to use my mattress as sort of DIY acoustic panels. Obviously, you know, I realise they won't be as effective as an actual acoustic panel because I don't have a membrane, I don't have a sort of fixed wooden panel, but because again, space, always space, was an issue for me. I didn't have the option really to be storing that kind of acoustic panel, so for me this was the closest I could get. I'm still using an open cell material and I've still got a permeable exterior fabric, so it's still going to do some degree of sound absorption, and they're also manoeuvrable because they're not attached to the bed frame, so that was a great bonus, so that when I was doing my acoustic treatment I could, you know, manoeuvre them around and try different positions to get the sound the best that it could be. So behind the mattress you'll see a gallery wall. The reason I chose to do this is that personally I really struggle to write and create in a space that's not inspiring me. I realised obviously that having a mirror and having glass picture frames is not great for sound, that obviously it's going to bounce off that and not be absorbed or deflected by it, but you know, you have to do a couple of compromises, and because I knew I could move the mattress, I kind of figured that at some point during the acoustic treatment that would be covering it anyway. My pictures are of Brighton because that's where I'm from and it inspires me, but you guys can obviously choose whatever you want. I just again attached these with these self-tapping screws, nice and easy, just drill them in, super easy, and yeah, so I have a gallery wall now. It inspires me a bit more, so it just makes the space a bit nicer, but I did put that in before I did the acoustic treatment. Obviously, we know why, because we've just spoken about it, so yeah. Because I surf a lot, obviously that involves wet wetsuit, wet bikini, generally wet things because you're in the ocean. I decided to tile the top of the shoe cabinet and tile the top of the other cabinet as well, and that would allow me somewhere to kind of just chuck a wet bikini once I was in the van and getting changed. Obviously tile, again, not great for sound absorption or diffusion, but you know, because this is such a small space and I am living in it and I am doing things other than recording in it, I did have to make a couple of compromises, so that was one of the compromises I made. Super easy. I just bought some tiles, grouted them, well, the grout is also adhesive, so stuck them down and then grouted them, nice and easy. Just be careful to wash the grout off with a damp cloth so you don't get kind of horrible white marks all over your tiles. So as we discussed in part 1, with my windows I obviously couldn't cover them because, again, as we discussed in part 1, I am a terrible driver and I need them for my blind spots. Instead, I went back to the YBS thermal insulation, which was the kind of silver bubble wrap type insulation we saw in the first half. I had loads of that left over and it seemed like a waste, and again, trying to be more sustainable. So what I did is I would kind of measure the size of the window, cut a bit of that roughly to shape, and then I would hold it up, push indents in around the sides, cut that shape out, and then I just bought a pack of self-screw suction cups off Amazon, poked a hole in the insulation and just pushed those through and screwed them tight, and that worked great. That covers my glass. Obviously it's you know, not the best solution to windows for sound dampening and acoustic treatment, but again, compromise is the key word of this project. So once you've done all that, you've got your window covers, you've got your bed, you've got your bed frame, the whole shebang, everything's looking pretty good, you can move on to the acoustic treatment. I'm just going to lean forward because the sun is now right in my eyes. Love that for us. But anyway, back to the video, back to acoustic treatment. So acoustic treatment is effectively the treating of standing waves in your room and those problem frequencies which will stand out in the later stages. Standing waves are more commonly known as room modes. You might have heard that term before if you're a musician or you've ever read any articles on home studios or studios in general. Effectively, there are 3 types. You have axial, which is when the waves are bouncing between 2 walls. You have
tangential.
I can't say that word. Tangential waves.
Tangential.
There we go. Those ones, which is when they are bouncing between sort of corners, like that. So they're going sort of like that. I'll put a diagram on the screen. And then you have oblique waves as well, which is between all surfaces in the room. All of them can cause problems. Generally, we're going to try and focus on the axial the most, just because those tend to be the loudest because they lose the least energy. But again, you will find a table that will show us all of them. So on to the next step. So there are many ways you can work out your room modes. The easiest way, if you're not great at maths and you've never done it before, is to use a website called amroc. Amroc allows you to put in your room dimensions. So for my van, obviously that was the 2.5, 1.5 and 1.5. And then it will give you a nice, I was about to say simple, but it's not super simple, but don't worry, I'm going to explain how to understand it. A table full of your room modes that can then be interpreted as to how to begin your acoustic treatment. Alternatively, if you want to go the traditional route and you'd rather work out your room modes yourself, you can use this equation, which I'm going to pop hopefully up there if, again, editing me is on it. And this will allow you to work out your room modes and to create your own table. I'm going to pop mine up here as well in comparison to the amroc one, just so you can see sort of the difference between them, whichever you think is going to work best for you, whether you would rather do it yourself, up to you. But the key thing is that you need to know your room modes before we even begin the acoustic treatment. What this table of room modes does is it gives you a rough guide as to what frequency is likely to be a problem. Otherwise, you could spend hours and hours trying to work it out. Obviously, your ear is the best bit of equipment that you have. So, you know, and especially once you've added in the furniture and once you're in the room modes, standing waves, they're all going to be affected by this kind of stuff. So using your ear is, again, best piece of equipment you have. But what this does is just give you a rough guide to work that off. So once you've got this table, get in your van. Obviously bring the table with you, bring a laptop, a speaker, because you're going to need to play a sine sweep. So once you're in your vehicle, you're all set up. What you're going to do first is set it up as it would be as a live room or a studio booth, however you want to describe it. So for me, I popped all my window covers on, shut the door, obviously, kind of started to lay out my furniture, made sure everything was all laid out as it would be when recording or mixing. And that was the first step. Once I'd done that, I obviously had my table next to me. I wrote down any frequencies that I thought could be problematic. So the way to spot this is if you have any frequencies that reoccur twice. So let's say you have 343 hertz appears 4 times in your table. That frequency is likely to be a problem, so make a note of that. Also note any that are very close together or very far apart, because again, standing waves, you're probably going to have an issue with that frequency too. So once you've done all that, you've got your room modes ready to go, you've identified your likely problem frequencies. What you're going to do is load a sine sweep. You can find these on YouTube, they're super common, there's loads of options out there. Try and find one that plays equal frequency for quite a long amount of time, so you have time to kind of really listen and gauge whether that frequency has gotten louder or quieter. But anyway, you're going to want to find a sine sweep and you're going to want to play that. As you play it, take notes as you listen to each frequency. Take notes if it's louder, quieter, if it just sort of sounds different in any way. Obviously, you can decide sort of what frequency range you want to go for. For me, I picked the range of a female vocalist, which is up to about 500 hertz, and a guitar, which is up to about 1,500, with the sort of very quiet little harmonics that a guitar has. Obviously, its main range is much smaller, but I chose to go all the way just because I tend to play acoustic guitar, which is, you kind of want those harmonics. That's what makes acoustic guitar sound so good. So I played a sine sweep up to 1,500, but again, whichever sine sweep works for you, you go for that one. I would personally play the sine sweep a couple of times, just mark down those frequencies, double check that you did hear that. Sometimes, obviously, when you're thinking about what you're listening a little bit too hard, it can be quite hard to kind of really identify that. So I would do it a couple times. Make sure you're taking notes on each frequency as you go. Once you've done that, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to play each frequency very slowly. I didn't do every individual frequency, I did it kind of by fives. So I did, 5 hertz, 10 hertz, 20 hertz, 15 hertz, then 20 hertz, etc, etc. I did this purely because of time reasons. It did still take me forever, but it is 100% worth doing it like this. And as you play each individual frequency, just really, really listen for anything louder, anything quieter. Once you find one that is louder or quieter, or that doesn't sound quite right, what you're going to do is continually play that section of the sine sweep. Either you can just loop that part of the video of your sine sweep sound, or find a separate sine video that has exactly that hertz. Either way, play that continuously, and then you're going to move around your van, listening out for where it sounds louder, where it sounds quieter, where it's being affected, and kind of find the place where it sounds as normal, as similar to the other frequencies that you've played in your sine sweep, and make a note of where that space was as well. Once you've done that for all of your frequencies, you should have then a rough sort of notes table, however you decide to do it, of where each frequency sounds best and where it sounds problematic. For me, I got very lucky with my van. I don't know if it was coincidence or my excellent soundproofing, we'll never know. But that happened to be in one position, sort of on the back side of the L shape of the bed. That happened to be my best listening position. It was where all my frequencies sounded the same level. Nothing was really booming or sort of quieter massively, apart from a couple of frequencies which were sort of massively outliers, and they sounded best, leant right up against the back doors or stood right in the front cabin, which obviously, you can't record from those points. So the next step then is to acoustically treat those frequencies so that they aren't a problem. Just a quick note, obviously when you're recording live sound, the recipient of those sound waves, of those frequencies, isn't your ear, or the more important recipient isn't your ear, it's a microphone. The reason I chose not to use a microphone when doing my acoustic treatment is just because I trust my ear a lot more, sort of hearing the sound as it is in the space. Microphones work through sound pressure, they're super sensitive to sound pressure as well. So if you find when you do set up your equipment and you do plug in your microphone, that from your listening position that you've worked out, it still doesn't sound quite right, or you're not quite happy with it, making little adjustments to that mic stand's position can really help the sound and make a huge difference spatially as well. So definitely do that if you are still having problems once you've done your acoustic treatment. So now that I've identified where I want want my listening position or singing or guitar playing position to be within my van where the frequencies sound the most balanced and I'm happy with that live sound. Once I've identified that space, I can now set about, or you can now set about treating those problem frequencies that are still sticking out. As expected in my van, I knew it because I obviously haven't covered the windows properly, and I have that gallery wall with the mirror and the glass. Bass frequencies were a big issue for me, kind of the 200 hertz range and below, because obviously, well, not obviously, you may not know, but glass and that kind of resonant frequency tends to be a huge issue in that range. So in order to treat that, I needed to give more absorption of that range. So the way I did this is by first moving my mattress panel around. Initially, I had it in front of the windows. However, I found that wasn't really solving the problem for my listening position, probably because where I'm singing from or listening from is right by my gallery wall. So I found that actually covering those picture frames and covering that mirror and having that absorption behind me was in fact the best way of taming those resonances and the boominess of the sort of lower range frequencies, and that helped to balance my sound a lot. I also used bass traps. Now, if you know anything about bass traps, best place to start for them is to use trihedral corners. So that is where two corners on a ceiling or two corners on a floor meet. So you have kind of three surfaces effectively that all meet at a point. That's the best place to start with bass traps. However, because again, I knew my problem was the windows, instead of doing that, I chose to cover the seam between the windows and the roof, where I found my sound was kind of resonating the most. Once I'd done that, I noticed that those frequencies, the problem frequencies, 200 hertz and below, were massively reduced and not having that resonance anymore. So once I had my mattress position and I had my bass traps in, I now had a really nice soundscape to work with. All my frequencies sounded all balanced, none were sticking out or causing problems by having kind of interference and rebounds from standing waves. So everything was sounding really good. I think, to be honest, part of the reason that my space did sound so good and I wasn't struggling with too much absorption and a dull sound was also due to my design of the roof. Obviously the different depths, lengths, widths, etc. of the pallet wood mentioned in the previous video helped with sound diffusion, and that helped my sound stay live even though I was adding all these absorption materials like the mattress and the bass traps. If you're still struggling with that, if you are finding that anything you record does sound too dull and there's too much absorption happening, you can also build or buy quadratic diffusers. So these come in different shapes and sizes. You have ones with kind of length ways wells, and you have ones with sort of more square shaped wells. They're based on a prime number sequence. I'll pop the calculation up above for you and link a video that explains it in much more detail, but effectively you would use that sequence to calculate the depth of your wells and the kind of intervals, regular intervals that you use them at. You can build these yourself. All you need to do is just get some nice and easy plywood, and I would use an acoustic cork as well, so back to that green glue that we talked about in the last video, just to seal and make sure that you've got sort of nice fluid connections and there's no interruptions between wood and wood. But again, if you're struggling with that dullness, sound diffusion, best way to fix it. You can buy them on Amazon as well. I believe there is a couple on there for sort of 70 quid, 100 quid. I'll put them up on the screen. But again, quadratic diffusers, that's the way to go for solving that if you are struggling with it. If you're still experiencing issues with really precise frequencies, if you're struggling with bass frequencies, treble frequencies, whichever it may be, you can use a Helmholtz resonator. The best way to describe a Helmholtz resonator is if you've ever blown over the top of a glass bottle and you hear a really specific frequency. So the way that they work is there is a calculation which I'll pop on the screen for you, and basically you use the volume of that space combined with the length of the port and the circumference of the gap effectively, and you target certain frequencies with that will then be sort of drawn in, and well, obviously when you blow over a bottle you hear that frequency then. The way a Helmholtz resonator works is you would have a super absorbent material, an acoustic panel, whatever you choose to use, right in the back of your space, of your bottle or your volume, And so that once that frequency is drawn in, it's absorbed and therefore is no longer a problem within your soundscape. I'll pop a diagram of a Helmholtz resonator up here. Obviously they're super simple. You can buy one or you can make one yourself. Again, just make sure that that space is sealed acoustically. I would use green glue or something similar, just so that you don't run the risk of having sound escaping or anything like that, frequencies interfering, all of that kind of stuff. But this is a really, really great way to target precise frequencies. Again, use that calculation, or you can find tables online as well with the sort of circumference and diameter of holes that you need to create in order to attack those frequencies compared to the volume of your box or your shape, however you choose to do it. Personally, I chose not to use a Helmholtz resonator for several reasons. One, I managed to treat my problem frequencies fairly easily. I think this was because I got lucky and they were all in the same range, they were all very close together. I also didn't have any room modes that were repeated, any frequencies that were repeated in my table, which obviously, again, very lucky. So I didn't use a Helmholtz resonator. The other reason I chose not to use one is that they need a roughly an estimated depth of 30 centimeters. Again, space, huge issue in my size van, so that would have been another compromise that I just didn't need to make really to get a good sound. And that's it really, that's your acoustic treatment. Once you've worked out your room modes and you've treated them, you should have a live kind of space that you're happy with. The way that I would test this is just plug in whatever recording equipment you're working with and, you know, do a recording, do a quick take of a singing or a quick take of guitar, and just kind of check that you're happy with the way it sounds, check it's not being distorted or not booming in certain, or being boosted in certain frequency ranges, and yeah, that's it really. So after this we're going to talk quickly about storage, power, all the boring bits, and then we're going to move on to the final reveal, so stick around. So if you've been watching this video the whole way through, there's probably one big question that's been on your mind the whole way through, and that will be power. Obviously, when you're using recording equipment, whether you have, you know, speakers, whether you're using a Scarlett Focusrite or a different interface, power is obviously a big need and a really critical part to being able to record. For me, because my budget was so low, and my space was constricted and sort of various reasons, power was not something that was easily accessible. I chose to use a power panel. They're super easy, you can buy them on most camping sites. You just plug in when you pull up to a campsite. There's plenty of campsites with isolated pitches, so you don't need to worry about, you know, children running noisily nearby, things like that. And I would just plug my equipment, my laptop into that and use that. Alternatively, if you're working with a bigger budget or you do want to be able to record as and when and not rely on campsite pitches, you could do a solar conversion. You can either pay someone to do this or you can do it yourself. Again, loads of videos on YouTube, have a look. There's loads of great tutorials out there. The other option is to get portable solar panels. The main issue with these for me is storage. They're quite large, quite bulky. They run up you about 500, I think, for the leisure battery and the panels. I'll link a couple that I find on Amazon, but yeah, storage for those is an issue in a smaller van. So again, up to you and your budget and what you think will work best for you. But from experience, I can tell you that running a little power cable through your front window at a campsite works perfectly fine. For storage, again, a key part of storage, especially for your equipment, is preventing, I hate motorbikes, I hate living in a city, can't wait to move into my van. A key part of storage, especially in a van, again, we've talked about it before, is moisture. You don't want your equipment getting damaged, you don't want your cables having water spilled on them, anything like that. So my advice to you guys would be to just buy yourself a plastic crate. Super easy to find, you can get them on Amazon, B&Q, Wix, you know, wherever you want to get them from. They just make sure you measure it obviously and check it fits under your bed. I got mine from B&Q and I can get all my cables, my laptop, my bass traps as well when I don't want them attached with command strips. I can just take them off, peel them apart and pop them in that storage, so that's a great thing to do as well. In terms of the rest of my storage, I obviously have my cabinets, but for clothes I chose to use Apple crates. You can get these on Facebook Marketplace or at a car boot sale, and I just fold my clothes up and pop those in, and again, measure them, check they fit under your bed before you buy them, but I think they look really nice. And I was going for that kind of a space that I would want to write in and to be creative in. That was important to me, so they really fit that aesthetic for me. So talking about aesthetics, for me, I'm someone who finds it really hard to create if I'm not enjoying the space I'm in. So for me, that included things like having a couple of plants. I bought some blankets from Etsy, you know, I painted the walls white. You know, the cabinets are tiled with nice colours, having a little rug on the floor, just really simple things like that. So here it is, the final reveal, the bit I'm sure you've all been waiting for. The first clip you're going to see is the van set up like it is for living space. As you can see, just let me open the door first. No, sometimes it doesn't work, the key. So this is the van set up like it would be as I was living in it. So you can see the shoe rack, bit of storage in the bottom there, nice bit of storage on the top too. Sort of got my blanket, and that's the other cabinet there as well. We've got a nice little gap between, which you would have seen in the initial diagram. That's where my mic stand's stored. Then we pan around to the gallery wall, as glorious as she always is. Bed, we've got my plant, a little bit of book storage. And you can see underneath the bed there, we've got the apple crate for the clothes, my recording equipment, my guitar, everything I need to turn it into a studio, and my little inside joke rug as well. So yeah, very happy with it. Yeah, really, really happy with it. I think it looks great. It's very sleek, it's very light and breezy as well. It's a really nice space to be in. Obviously I'll be writing in here as well as recording, so it really was important to me to achieve that, and I really think I have. And now I'm going to show you guys what it looks like when it's set up as a recording space. So roll the clip, editing me. So yeah, so you can see here the window covers, the duvet's been moved to cover that gap between the front seats, as you can see there. The laptop stand in full swing. I've got my little Scarlett Focusrite fits on there as well. The light's going so I can see what I'm doing. And then we pan around to the back, you can see where I've placed the bass traps, my mattress placement as well, very key there. And yeah, so once I'd finished setting up, I did do a little test recording. I recorded some vocals for a track that I've been working on for a while. Roll that clip too, editor me. And you can hear, you know, the sound sounds great, it's nice and balanced. There are a couple of little background noises, and that is because currently the van is parked in the centre of a very, very busy town, which is where I'm living at the moment. Obviously, when you're on a nice quiet campsite in a private pitch, you won't have those noises. So it'll sound, you know, you'll get rid of those background noises. But overall, I'm really happy with the sound. I think it sounds great. It's a really good sort of, you know, rough recording to then edit and get to that really good demo quality sound. So yeah, really pleased with that aspect of it as well. So my final thoughts, tips, tricks, things that I would do again over. So the first thing I'm going to start with is space. Obviously I've said it so many times in these two videos that space was an issue for me. I have got a small van, I'm very aware of that. If you have the budget to be able to buy bigger, 100% do. You have a lot more space to work with. You know, you can get a much bigger gap between your two walls, between your exterior and interior. You'd be able to fit Helmholtz resonators in, you know, it's just more space to work with, and the more space you have to work with, the better, in my opinion. If I was working with a van the size of a Sprinter, what I would do is actually decouple the entire exterior. So much like recording studios often have, they're normally suspended or, you know, used with struts, either way, however they do it. But I would effectively build a room within a room completely. I would have a wall between the front cabin and the back of the van, the cargo bit. And I would have this space that is completely isolated from the exterior, and so that you are really, really soundproofing your space and preventing that transfer of sound. It should be easy enough with a van that size because, again, more space to work with, but that's how I would go about it. I've linked a video down below of a van studio, a very famous one actually, that is here on YouTube, and how they did that. He talks through the video about how they did it. Theirs is actually split into a live room and a control room. Obviously you don't have to do that if you're living in it, you probably want a bed somewhere, but you can take a couple of ideas from that and use them in your own video, in your own build even. The other thing I would say, if you are going to do that, I would even take it a step further, and you could actually use that space between, let's say, floor and, you know, exterior floor and interior floor. If you had measured the volume of that and you knew the exact volume of that gap, you could actually even turn that into a Helmholtz resonator. As I've explained, a Helmholtz resonator is just a space which you know the volume of, and you've put some holes into, not some holes, calculate your whole space. But yeah, you could build a Helmholtz resonator, you know, as part of your second skin. That would be a great way of kind of conserving your space as well, because you're obviously 2 birds, 1 stone. But I would do that if I had the ability to do that. I think it's a great way to target your frequencies. Obviously, you would, you know, need to calculate your room modes before you do that, to give you just a rough idea of kind of what sort of how you're going to do a Helmholtz resonator. But what you can do is just take the measurement of the volume and then add the holes once you're doing the acoustic treatment, and, you know, still have that result of a working, functioning resonator. Obviously, as I mentioned before, my acoustic panels, my absorption panels, you know, they're a little bit DIY. They haven't got the wooden frame and the membrane that they normally do. I've explained why that's the case in this video and possibly the last video. Can't fully remember, it's been a long day of filming. But anyway, if you have the space to work with, if you, let's say you've got a sprinter, a really common layout in a sprinter is to have your bed across the back and have kind of bench seats with a table. What I would be doing with the covers for those bench seats is actually using a traditional acoustic panel method and having a wooden frame and a membrane and a permeable fabric on the outside. I'll pop a diagram up here. And again, you would have them maneuverable. You could even go as far as to build your own ones and pop them on the walls if you have that space and that luxury. But again, if I had the space and I wasn't having to compromise between my mattress and acoustic panels, I would 100% be doing that properly. I think it's well worth getting that absorption to the best of its ability, in effect. Again, if you have more space, you could incorporate a quadratic diffuser into wall art. You know, behind, let's say you have counters to cook on, you could have it as behind that, because you need that depth, obviously. You do need a bigger van to make that work. I mean, you could do it in a small van, but you lose a lot of space from it, so I personally wouldn't recommend it, which is why I didn't do it. But you could do it if you have a larger space. And again, you know, build it yourself or use that calculation that I've showed you previously in this video. I think the main thing with these van builds is to try and get dual purpose out of as many things as you can. So using the resonant absorbers as bench seats, having a quadratic diffuser that is also a bookcase, you know, all these things. Like in mine, we've got the mattress that doubles as the panels, and, you know, all this stuff that really does help to create a space that you can create in, and a space that sounds sonically nice. But dual purpose is the biggest thing for such a specific space that has such specific needs. I really think that's the way to go, and it is well worth doing a lot of thinking and a lot of planning, like I did, before you even start to build or start to think about materials, because you really do need to get a solid plan before you start hacking at your van with a hammer and a saw. My last tip, again, if you have more height in your van than I do, is you can buy sort of hanging, you screw them into a wall basically that hold your guitar. The one thing I have found recording in my van is that it gets very annoying when I'm recording guitar to be picking it up and putting it down on the bed, and leads get tangled, and it gets tangled in the covers of the mattress covers and all of that kind of stuff. So if you had a way that you could just, you know, pop your guitar in the hook on the wall out the way, when you want to just edit something or reset your take or whatever, I think that would be hugely beneficial as well. So I would advise you to do that if you've got a bigger van to work with again. So that pretty much concludes this series. We've talked about sound dampening. I've given you ideas on how to soundproof your space. We've talked about decoupling. We've talked about acoustic treatment, a run through of what standing waves are, room modes, how to work them out using amroc, how to then treat them using bass absorbers, using absorption panels and bass traps, that's what I meant to say. Helmholtz resonators we've talked about briefly, quadratic diffusers, you've got the equation for that, and also a couple of video links, hopefully, if editor me has been on it. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the end of this series. I hope you guys have found it good. I hope you found it interesting. I hope it helps you build your own recording studios. I'm absolutely thrilled with my final piece. I mean, my van now compared to my van a year ago is astronomical. I'm very excited to get on the road and record in it and have that ability now. So yeah, if you're thinking about doing this, definitely do it. It is so worth it. And yeah, that's all I've got for you guys. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe, please like, comment, share with your friends. If you want to follow me on Instagram, it's at girlinavanmusic. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time.